The Irish NFL show. We are less than 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. You can join us on Thursday the 28th of April from 11:30 p.m. for Draft Night Live. Looking forward to it. Bring the coffee. We are presented by Trust Gaming, the Aer Lingus College Football Classic, and also many arcade systems with more to come on the bottom of the screen. Throughout this show, joined by Colin Cronin, Brian O'Leary. Mark Cockerell apparently is currently en route to Vegas, walking there. Maybe getting the Seacat or the Irish ferries over. I don't know what's going on there, boys, but hoping to have Mark on next week. How's it going, boys?
Good. It's been, I suppose, another week of a lot of things happening in the league. I think, firstly, obviously, Dwayne Haskins passing in tragic circumstances. You see the stories that come out, how personable he was, what a great guy he was, and to see anyone pass away at that young age is really sad. So obviously, you saw the way in which the Steelers all talked about him, including Mike Tomlin. So his loss will be felt across the NFL, but also obviously across the college game where he had such a big impact. But people talked about the smile and the impact that he had, and I think that's what we want to remember. So R.I.P. Dwayne Haskins.
Yeah, Brian, it was shocking news over the weekend, wasn't it? Because this is a guy who was doing very, very well in Pittsburgh, and the management and ownership were very excited about his potential as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's reflective in the number of statements we've seen over the past few days from Pittsburgh players, the Steelers themselves, Ohio State, the Buckeye Nation, who are, I suppose, distraught by the news. And look, yeah, everybody's come out, and I suppose you get a sense of the guy else. Nobody really knew him in terms of ourselves, but you can sense by the nature of the nice comments and the nice statements that have come out, and his family have put a nice statement out today, kind of thanking everybody for the support. It's going to be a difficult road for the family, and it's a huge loss. No matter what the circumstances are in life. At 24, to lose your life, he's married, he's a brother. His parents are still alive. It's a difficult time for him.
Obviously, our thoughts are with Dwayne Haskins' family and friends at this very, very sad moment, and it was just shocking news for anyone to lose their life at 24 years of age it's just awful, and obviously our thoughts with him and his family. Rest in peace, Dwayne. It's just one of those things where it really does shock as well. Looking at a couple of things, lads, just around the rest of the league. The day of recording this, Baker Mayfield was on a podcast. Now, if you want to guess what the podcast was called, I don't want to guess. The YNK, You Know What I Mean podcast. So we definitely have a chance of getting Baker on at some point. He says, quote, "I feel disrespected 100% because I was told one thing and the team completely did another. That's what I'm in the middle of right now. This is the important part. I've had 4 different head coaches in 4 years, a bunch of different coordinators. I think we know, Colin, that maybe Baker Mayfield won't play again in Cleveland. Do you think he's helping himself, regardless if me or you or Brian agree with what he's saying? Do you think this sort of situation is helping himself when he could be on the cusp of going somewhere else, or do you think he's obviously he's entitled to, I guess, express his opinion?
Firstly, if there are people out there who haven't seen the video, check out the video, because the dog is the superstar of the entire
George
show.
Kittle saying that as well.
Absolutely magnificent. I think Baker is probably looking to force his way out, and I think he's giving his version. I mean, look, if you take it from a footballing perspective and you take away everything, and we talked about it with Lindsay Jones, and there are 22 outstanding lawsuits against or civil actions against Deshaun Watson. Right, that is all there, all of that baggage, and you can't really divorce it. But just on an ability level, Deshaun Watson is a better quarterback. So the Browns made that decision. The Browns made the decision to forget morality, to forget everything else, and to upgrade at the position, right? At the player, not the person, the player. They decided to upgrade. I suppose it's how they went about it and what they said to Baker. But the reality is, I've said it so many times on this show, whatever people in sports say publicly, you gotta take it with a grain of salt, because teams lie to players, teams aren't honest with players, agents aren't honest with teams. Everybody's playing a game. I mean, the Seahawks didn't tell Bobby Wagner he was gonna be let go. This goes on all the time. Brock Osweiler wouldn't take the call from the Broncos because he knew he was getting the huge contract to go to Texas. So there's all these sorts of games, and I think Baker probably got a bit tired of some of the shots that were being taken at him by not necessarily the team, but those around the team. We're all aware that it was said a few weeks ago they wanted somebody more mature at QB. That came out. So to me, I suppose I can understand the frustration from Baker a little bit, given the situation that he finds himself in. And obviously I think that the number of teams, the places he could go, has reduced somewhat. So I think this is a little bit of frustration on Baker Mayfield's behalf.
Brian, the one thing I'll say for you is this gives me hope. This podcast only has 7,000 followers, and they're filming it in a kitchen with a sofa. So I think we should get Baker on the show. Maybe fly him over and put him in your living room.
Be a friend of a friend scenario. Just in terms of what he said, I agree with him. I think he should try force the Browns into a situation, because up to now the Browns have literally held all the cards here. He's in a situation where, as Columns alluded to, the teams are running. The NFL season gravy train is nearly at an end in terms of quarterback carousel. Maybe Seattle, and I think that's something that came out of the interview as well today, that he thinks potentially there's something there. And he really wants to force the hand. April 19th, turn up for voluntary training camp. He's a Browns player. Why shouldn't he turn up? The Browns want Baker to go away, but Baker's not going away. And today it's very evident that he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that they know he's still in the background. Ultimately, it's coming down to finances. They owe him $80 million. They picked up the 5th-year option. I'd imagine they're regretting that now. And who's going to make a trade and take $80 million on the books? Teams that have a lot of cap. A lot of teams don't have a lot of cap left over because they've done all the deals in free agency. Teams are sitting, waiting, hoping that they release him. If he gets released, he'll go through the waiver wire. Someone will pick him up and offer him $4 or $5 million, and he'll take it as a prove it deal. And I think maybe that's what Seattle are hoping for. Or we see something happen on the night of the draft where someone doesn't get a quarterback that they want. But I do think he needs to put it out there. But we saw something similar last year with Rodgers leading up to the draft. It came a time he felt that Green Bay had promised him a move. It didn't materialize. Came up to the draft period. Right, I'm going to start making noises. Baker's making noises now, hoping he gets that trade leading up to the draft.
Talking about money, talking about remuneration, and talking about making themselves known and heard. Derek Carr getting a 3-year contract extension worth $121.5 million reduced column. Taking your hat off and taking my hat off, where does Derek Carr rank in terms of AFC West quarterbacks? Look, for me personally, this move had to be made by the Raiders. It's good to tie him down for 3 years. Decent money. If you're looking at that ceiling of about 40 million with the cap coming in next year, it's not too bad, is it?
I think that's what you're looking at in terms of quarterbacks. And what else were the Raiders going to do? What were their other options? I mean, I suppose what they're looking at is Josh McDaniels is a known admirer of Carr. So this was talked about as soon as McDaniels took the job, that essentially there would likely be an extension. The fact that they brought in Devonta Adams, who they played together in college, again was another signal that this is where it was going. Look, I think you need Derek Carr to show it in games that really, really matter. I know Brian and I differ somewhat on the way in which we think about Derek Carr, but I suppose I can see sense in what the Raiders have done, because I don't think there were a huge number of options out there. Ordinarily, right, with real superstar QBs, they tend to get these 6-year, 5-6 year contracts. That's what we have seen. So for the Raiders, essentially, they are saying Derek Carr, I think, is a very good QB, and we're going to go with it for the next 3, and then we're going to see where we're at. I mean, it's very difficult. Look, where our guest, this week, Peter King talked about like this division, right? You're in the AFC West. You have Mahomes, you have Herbert, you have Russell Wilson. I'm an enormous fan of all 3 of those. So I don't think Derek Carr is at their level in terms of what he can do, but what I think he is very, very good at is when the game plan is there, he is really good at implementing a game plan, right? The Raiders took Von Miller out of games against the Broncos because they got the ball out so quickly. So to me, yeah, it makes a lot of sense for the Raiders to do it, but they are in the most competitive division in the NFL.
Brian, in an off-season where you've seen the Chargers really upgrade their defense while the Chiefs have lost some players. They brought in Juju and obviously Russell Wilson going to Denver. This was a really, really important move after getting Devontae Adams for the Raiders.
Devontae Adams, Jakob Johnson, Chandler Jones. I mean, this Raiders team finished
Max
10 and
Crosby
7.
getting paid.
10-7 last year, made the playoffs. We're close to making the playoffs the previous year. They would look at it as they're going in the right direction. New head coach, what's the right thing to do? Transition into a new structure. Of course, you're going to keep the quarterback. Yeah, I wasn't taken back by the money. I think he's gone into a kind of category of 7 quarterbacks in the league that are earning over 40 million a year, which is staggering money, because he has had his flaws. And like when Colin says, I like Derek Carr, again, it's relevant to who you support. Previously, before the Russell Wilson trade, would you have been opposed to Derek Carr? I'm not sure you would have. Maybe you would. Who knows? Anyway, the point being, I think he's the right man to have there. And he has the relationship with Devontae Adams from their time together, so you would expect them to hit the ground running again next season. It was always going to be get done. It was just a case of when it was going to get done.
Starting to round up a lot of this free agency and contracting carousel, as you said. Just a bit of information on our sponsors or our partners, the Arlingus College Football Classic. As I should have said at the start of the show, pre-sale is over. We're hoping to potentially have a pre-sale, our own pre-sale for the game. More on that. Check our socials out. We've got TikTok, you can see at the bottom as well. You can enter when we get to 1,000. Brian is going to do a special TikTok, and we're looking forward to Brian's Book It Trent style bet TikToks coming at the start of the season every Friday. Very excited for that, Brian. But look, tickets are on sale April 29th, and all the information is on our social. Looking forward to it. Colin, in your adequate language, would you like to describe our guest this week?
Our guest is a legendary figure in the game. I know that he is somebody who we all read regularly. It's certainly a discussion topic in our WhatsApp group. Did you see the latest column from Peter King? We are delighted to welcome a friend to the show. He joined us back in the early days. I think it was January of last year when Peter was first on with us, and we had a great chat then. And we had another great chat earlier in the week. So sit back, enjoy our chat with Peter King.
show is a guy we see on the Sky Sports NFL channel a lot, on Pro Football Talk with Mike Florio. Does a fantastic job with NBC Sports. I know a lot of people read his Football Morning in America column at about 6 or 7 a.m. every Monday morning. Look, Peter King, it's an honor to have you back on the show. A very, very warm welcome back to the Irish NFL show.
Oh, Michael, thanks a lot. As I said before we came on the air, I've watched a few of your shows. You guys are fun. And you know what is so cool about it? I found this out a few years ago when I made a trip with some NFL players to write about them. We were in Edinburgh. We were in Liverpool. I forget where else, but we were in 4 or 5 spots. And I just simply could not believe. You expect fans to be passionate, but I remember we were in Liverpool one night and some guy said, I think the Ravens might have had the 23rd pick in the draft last year. And the question came up, do you think Derek Barnett is still going to be there for the Ravens, or do you think the Eagles will pilfer him before he gets to the Ravens? I said, I have no clue. I mean, you know more about this than I do. But that's the kind of just like earnest fandom that I've encountered so often, both with you guys and I mean, almost anywhere. It's why, like, I'm going to Germany this year. I got to see that game. I got to see that experience. Tom Brady playing in Germany. I mean, that is going to be one wild scene. I have no idea what it'll be like, and you know what? I'll just say one other thing. If Dan Rooney were alive, there'd be a game in Dublin. And you guys should not give up the ghost. Don't give it up. You really should. You should push for this because there's no doubt in my mind. And I don't know, where would they play? Croke Park?
Yeah.
I mean, I saw U2 there a few years ago, and there was 85,000 people there. I mean, that is a big friggin' stadium. And I don't know. I would assume, I don't know this, would an NFL regular season game sell out in Croke Park or not?
I definitely would think so. I'm sure these boys would
there would be people outside who can't get in.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I think, look, today. Sorry.
I totally understand why they're so big on London. It's sort of the hub, and all the spokes of the wheel can come from all over Europe, almost on a day trip, and see the game. And I get it, but I don't know. I've been on the NFL to share the wealth a little bit too. But anyway.
It was obviously fantastic, Peter. Great to have you on the show. As you know, again, I think it's the second time now. Great to meet you in LA at the Super Bowl. I was literally I was telling these guys, I was nearly starstruck seeing you in the press box. It was Peter King. Had to say hello, but you know, I know, Peter, our accents in real life are completely different to this, and I'm sure you're probably standing there going, "What is he saying?" I can only imagine.
No, I mean. You know, we were talking about Belfast before, and I said, man, I wish I had used the, I wish I basically had used the subtitles on it because, you know, I'm watching it there in my house and I think I understand, but I miss I'd say a quarter of all the concepts in that movie, but it was still really an interesting movie. But no, my wife and I have been a couple of times now. We're really we're big Ireland fans. So anyway, good to be on with you.
Well, Peter, there's a college game in Dublin in August. So if you want to come back, we would be delighted.
Who's playing?
Northwestern are playing Nebraska.
Wow. It's a Big Ten football game. That is really, really cool.
Yeah, we had Mark Murphy on with us last week. We invited him, obviously Zach Taylor from the Bengals, another alum connection there. So if Peter King wants to join the party, you're more than welcome.
I might miss it, but I don't know. I'll look into it.
I suppose, Peter, when this goes out, you mentioned the draft and the interest that there is from fans over here, but we're going to be, less than 2 weeks out when this goes out.
Yeah.
And when we look at the draft, one of the interesting things is the way in which teams have changed their approach. So if you look at, say, 2015, 2016, almost 95% of the teams had a first round pick. This year, it's 75% of the teams. It obviously huge drop there, and it's been dropping over the last few years. Is this the Les Snead effect?
I think it's partially Les Snead, but I also think it is. Look, I had a long talk with the general manager of the Chiefs, Brett Veach, after the trade. Obviously, after the trade for when they traded Tyreek Hill. And one of the things that he said was that, look, because I don't necessarily think it is all the Les Snead effect. I think it is a team like Kansas City looking at its roster and its financial flexibility and asking this question: if we commit for, let's say, probably you're thinking mentally at least 4 years with Tyreek Hill, and it would have cost them probably 27 or 28 million a year on average. And you've already got the financial commitment you're making to Patrick Mahomes. You're really starting, and they have a couple of other very highly paid guys. You're already asking yourself, is this the smartest way to build a team for the next 5 years? And so I don't necessarily think they said, well, look at what the Rams are doing. They're making these big, bold trades, and so we'll make a big, bold trade. I think I think several teams, Green Bay was a little bit different, because in Green Bay, that's a very interesting story. As I wrote in my column, basically, Davante Adams told the Packers, do not franchise me. I don't want to be here. I want to leave. Part of this is because Davante Adams basically gave the Packers a lot of chances to sign him to a peak of the market contract, which he was determined to get. And when he couldn't get the peak of the market contract, when they refused to give it to him, he said, okay, that's it. You've seen me here long enough. I don't want to argue with you all the time. You're not going to pay it. Just let me go. And so the Packers then basically said, what's the best deal we can get for Davante Adams? And, I think they got a pretty good deal. They didn't get a Tyreek Hill kind of deal, but they got a pretty good, a pretty good deal. And so I think in the Tyreek Hill case, what happened was they said, look, we can get 5 draft choices, 3 of which are high picks, and we can use this to help restock our roster. The coincidental thing, and I bring those 2 teams up because if you look at where the Chiefs and the Packers are right now, both teams have 2 picks at the end of the first round and 2 picks at the end of the second round. And the reason why that is so valuable this year is that the receiver group in this draft is very rich. It's the best position in this draft. So if you're the Packers and if you're the Chiefs and you say, okay, do I want to commit 28 million, maybe 30 million bucks to a player who is getting a little older? And in the case of Tyreek Hill, a 60-year guy who is a very, very thin guy. And, what happens if he starts getting beat up a little bit? So what you can do is you can spend the money elsewhere with other players on your team. And in the case of Kansas City, they are ridiculously confident in their ability to draft and to choose wide receivers. You know, that plus the fact that they've picked up a couple of good receivers in the offseason. I think Juju Smith-Schuster, I mean, look, I think he might catch 100 balls in that offense. He is going to be the type of target who Mahomes is not going to be able to turn away from. But overall, your initial question, I don't mean to drone on about this, but your initial question, I think, is really interesting about how teams are looking at the Rams, and maybe some teams are following the Rams. But I just think there are more teams that I see right now who don't want to make, let's say, a wide receiver a $30 million player. And what they would rather do is try to draft two of them and just keep the line moving, keep it going, so that over time you start developing another really good wide receiver who is 1/10 the cost of a Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill.
Peter, whilst it wasn't at the magnitude of the trade we saw last year where the 49ers moved up to 3, last week we had quite a detailed trade between the Saints and the Eagles. And I suppose vast majority feel that the Eagles are thinking long-term in terms of a quarterback next year. But you were quite positive on your podcast this week of the Saints and how there's reasons why they're being aggressive, and they were quite close last year. They nearly made the playoffs. Do you think they're finished, or in terms of moving up again, or is it they're there to pick two particular players, whether it's an offensive line or a wide receiver?
Brian, I think the best thing you can say about the Saints, Mickey Loomis is the guy who is at the forefront of this deal, but there's somebody else who works there by the name of Jeff Ireland, who has had a great run at drafting, probably over the last 5 or 6 years, all things considered, where they've been picking and all that. I don't think a team has drafted better overall than the Saints have. And so I will not be surprised if there is a player that they have targeted. Maybe there's one of these quarterbacks they like. I wish I knew. I don't think they're going to move up high for anyone but a quarterback. That's not really, I don't think they want to sacrifice all the good. They're not going to do it for a tackle. I would be shocked because I just don't think they got Ryan Ramczyk at the end of the first round in 2017. So I just don't see them doing that for a tackle. For a quarterback, if they love one of them, who knows? But I think what I would say about where they are right now, I think Loomis put it the best to me. He goes, listen, there's such a wide variety of how people are ranking their players this year. And I've heard this from a bunch of GMs, that we could get one of our top 20 players sitting there at number 48 with our third pick in this draft. So he said, when we made that trade, we were cognizant that we're going to get 3 of the best players on our board. And that is why I think they made it. They've gotten a lot of criticism for trading next year's 1, which is understandable, and then the 2 the following year. That has gotten a lot of criticism. And I understand why they're getting criticized. But I think if you're the Saints, you got to look at this. Your defense is maybe 1 or 2 years away from its expiration date. You know, you might have 2 more really good years with that defense. Cameron Jordan and Marshawn Lattimore and Marshawn Lattimore's younger than Jordan, but I think that the way they look at it is we can beat the Bucs. We know we can beat the Bucs. We think we're better than the Bucs, even without Breeze. So, you know, to me, I think there's a time when you have to go for it. And I think that's what the Saints are doing.
Talking about the Bucks there, Peter, you've been very vocal, and I personally think you've been at the forefront of this. I mean, we've talked briefly about the international expansion of the game. We're now looking at the concept of the new marketing agreement for international teams, and you've really been at the forefront of talking about the potential of these 4 teams in the German market, maybe alternating as maybe hosts or visitors over the next few years. There seems to be a lot of rumors here about the Bucks maybe playing the Chiefs this year, but obviously that's all still TBC. Is it your understanding that would maybe alternate year on year between those teams, or is that maybe a preference?
Yeah, here's what I'm almost positive you're going to see happen in Germany. So, there are 4 teams. There's New England, there's Kansas City, there's Cincinnati, and then there's Carolina. I think I'm right. Am I right in that? Yeah. So this year, the NFC teams have 9 home games. And next year, the AFC teams will have 9 home games. I'm hearing that next year, it's either going to be New England or Kansas City with the host game in Germany. I'd be surprised if Kansas City was the road team this year against Tampa Bay in the game in Germany. It just, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense when they're either going to play in Germany in 23 or 25. I don't know. It's a little bit weird. Plus, the fact is that I feel pretty sure that the Bucks are going to want Patrick Mahomes for a game in Tampa. You don't want to give away all of your great games. But anyway, I digress. So because the NFC teams have 9 home games this year and the AFC teams will have 9 home games next year, it's very convenient for the NFL to say, we're going to give the NFC teams, when they have 9 home games in 22 and 24, it'll be Tampa Bay in 22, Carolina in 24, and then the AFC teams, New England and then Kansas City in 23 and 25 in some order. And I don't know which will be which. But that seems to make the most sense to me.
Peter, we had the good fortune to speak to Coach Rivera during the Super Bowl weekend in LA, and one of the things he talked about that was the importance of the QB position in a real QB-driven league. And obviously, they made a play for some QBs in the offseason, but not got Wilson, they kind of immediately went with Wentz. Were you surprised that they didn't take more time to look at other options, given what they had to give up for Wentz? Or do you think that, Wentz could be a good fit there in Washington?
So I think what happened with Carson Wentz in Indianapolis is the owner, Jim Irsay, who can be an impetuous person, was extremely angry after the last 8 days of the season. They lose at home to the Raiders. They need to win one of the last 2 games. They lose at home to the Raiders, and then they get swamped by the Jaguars in Jacksonville. And all you heard in the day or 2 or 3 after that is how Jimmy Irsay was seething about how they played, and particularly how his quarterback played. And I can just tell you this. I think Frank Reich, when they made this trade, the coach of the Colts, when they originally made the trade, that Frank Reich thought that Carson Wentz was so damaged as, mentally as a quarterback, that he thought it could take us 2 years to get him on the right path. And at the end of this year, I think that's certainly how he felt, that it's going to take another year to kind of get him on the right path. So what do you expect if you're Frank Reich and your owner is really upset, and you might not be able to get that second year? You can fight another battle, but do you really want to do that? And are you positive about Carson Wentz? And I don't think either he or Chris Ballard, the general manager, were positive that Wentz is going to be able to turn it around. So I think it was hard for them to go in and pound the table with the owner and say, you got to give us one more year with Carson Wentz. That's the problem. But let's look at what Washington did. I think that Washington has been used to seeing a better Carson Wentz. And, those in the front office in Washington and Ron Rivera to some degree remember Carson Wentz as one of the top 6 or 8 quarterbacks in football back in 2017 era. He's still very young. I think the one thing that has really hurt Wentz is that he's proven to be not the most coachable player. He's one of those guys who has a reputation for, I have the answers and I know what I'm doing. We're going to be okay. And I don't think with his recent history that does him any favors. So you're right. It's a questionable call. And I think had this been a year like last year with quarterbacks, I bet Washington would not have done it. I think they would have taken a risk. I think Washington would have said, well, at the least we'll get Mac Jones. Now I must say that last year when they were drafting as kind of the final playoff team. And this year when they're drafting, I think they're at number 11. And so what I mean is that if they had the 11th pick last year, they would have definitely gotten one of these quarterbacks. And this year, I'm not even sure that the best quarterback this year is worth is better than what Mac Jones was last year. So I think you're in a tricky spot, and but I do think that Washington will be a little bit more patient with Wentz.
Peter, that kind of brings me to the question around these quarterbacks in the draft. At the end of last season, a lot of people felt that there was no standout quarterback. Initially, it was Pickett, then Malik Willis. The last week, it's been Desmond Ridder who's getting all the attention. Matt Rhule has a relationship with Kenny Pickett from their time in Temple. They're picking at 6. He's kind of under pressure as a head coach. This could potentially be a tough year for him. Do you think he goes quarterback?
That's such a great question. I think in an ideal world, he'd love to trade down. And Scott Fitterer, the general manager, they'd love to trade down. That is a place where the owner is putting tremendous pressure on the head coach. And so Chris Sims said something I thought that was really, really smart. He said, here's the problem with taking Kenny Pickett in the draft, whether you take him at 6 or trade down to pick a number, wherever, and take Kenny Pickett. And the headlines after that is that, okay, Carolina's got their quarterback of the future. And Sims' point, which I thought was so good, is that they'll go to training camp and the players will see it, media will see it, the coaches will probably see it. Sam Darnold's better than Pickett. And so, it's easy to say, well, Sam Darnold hasn't played well enough in the games. And you're right about that. But don't you want, if you draft a player, don't you want that at quarterback in the first round? Don't you want that player to come in and show signs of, I don't know when he's going to play, but whenever he does, this guy's going to be really good. I mean, what happens if he comes in and Darnold is playing a lot better than him in training camp and just looks to be a more skilled player with a better arm? That's the issue I think that Carolina faces. Now, the other issue that Carolina faces is they have one pick in the top 135 picks of this draft. One pick, and that's it. So if they take a quarterback there, they're almost done. You know, it's pretty much over for them at that point. The only reason I'm saying this is that there are a lot of factors in Carolina at play. And if they draft a Kenny Pickett at number 6, that would definitely be overdrafting a player. And so all of those things, you put those all together and you say they're in a tough spot. Carolina is really in a tough spot. Who knows? They may love him. They may love Malik Willis. They may really love one of these guys, pick them and be euphoric about it. We'll see what happens. But my gut feeling is they're probably going to sit there at 6 and take one of the quarterbacks and put tremendous pressure on that quarterback right away.
Time will tell in under 2 weeks, Peter. And look, we all love hypothetical situations. We all love maybe guessing certain parts of the schedule. If you're the NFL, Peter, this big kickoff game, and I asked a few people this last week, this big kickoff game on NBC, obviously, I think September the 8th, September the 9th. Who should open against the Rams in SoFi?
Denver. Because I think, now look, I think it's going to be one of two teams from what I'm hearing. I think it's going to be Denver or Buffalo. Now, the natural tendency is to say Buffalo and Buffalo and the Rams is one of the best games of the season. You're going to get a great rating on September 8th, Thursday night. You don't have to use the Buffalo game right there. You're going to get a great rating if you use even a good opponent there. There's one issue. Last year, the NFL scheduled Dallas and Tampa for the first game of the season, the Thursday night game. It was a great game, went right down to the end. And so you say, well, what does that matter? Who cares? The problem is the NFL got a fantastic rating. Ratings were up 25% last year, year over year, with the previous year's game, Patrick Mahomes against Houston. So the last thing the NFL wants is to be sitting there 5 p.m. Friday afternoon. The ratings come in from the first game of the season. And the big headline would be ratings down 18% over last year. Is the NFL in a slump? Have we overrated everybody's mania about the NFL? And so I realize that sounds like a dumb reason to take Buffalo and to put them in the first slot. But I think overall, the NFL believes that Buffalo at the Rams, Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs against Matthew Stafford and the Super Bowl champions is a better number, a better rating potentially than if you play him against Denver, even though everybody will say, hey, let's look and see what Russell Wilson looks like in a Broncos uniform. First game post Seattle after 10 years in Seattle. A lot of us would say, let's see that one. But I think overall, the game potentially would be better and more even all the way through 4 quarters if it were Buffalo. So I think it's going to be one of those two. I can't tell you which one. If I were the NFL, I'd play Denver and I'd save the Buffalo game till later in the year.
Well, we will find out, I suppose. The schedule release will be in the not too distant future, so we'll find out. But Peter, I want to just go back to Washington, because in fairness, you have been talking about Dan Snyder and his ownership of that team for quite a while. But stories today that the House Oversight Committee have written to the FTC regarding potential, violations. Given everything, that you have written about in the past, does this move the needle in terms of a potential ownership change there?
If it's true, it moves the needle. Plus, the NFL is still investigating a sexual charge against Daniel Snyder in the wake of all the other charges that they let him off easy for. And everybody said, what do you mean? They fined him $10 million. That's not letting them off easy. Well, that's also 2% of the team's annual revenue. So I don't mean necessarily big deal, but big deal. So I think now these two things could be game changers. And look, I've told this story a lot, but when I was very young covering the NFL in the 80s, from 1985 to 1988, I worked for a newspaper in New York. I covered the New York Giants. Their arch rivals were Washington. And in those days, when there would be a game, New York at Washington, they had this old rickety stadium in Washington called RFK Stadium, Robert F. Kennedy Stadium. And there were 4 or 5 times every game I ever covered there, if it was a big game, where you'd be sitting in the press box. And the press box, if you can imagine this, was kind of like slung down from the upper deck of the stadium. So it was almost like if you looked at it, if you looked at it, it's almost like it was added later, and it was just like hanging down from the upper deck of the stadium. But so that press box would vibrate and shake, and you'd feel like you were in an earthquake. And the first time I ever felt it, I'm holding on to the table in front of me like, holy crap, what is going on? And everybody was just chuckling because it happens there most games. And so that was a great rivalry. That was a great team. They had great ownership in Jack Kent Cooke. They had a great coach in Joe Gibbs, a great GM in Bobby Beathard. Both those guys are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And now what do they have? Over the last 22 years now, since Snyder has owned it, they have been the turd in the punch bowl. That's all there is to it. They have been a lousy franchise. And Daniel Snyder has run this franchise into the ground, period. And for some reason, the NFL has been defending him and propping him up and helping him and all this stuff. And look, the franchise is an embarrassment. Last year, toward the end of the year, they played a game against Dallas where people who were there in the stadium thought it was 70-30. Dallas at Washington, which used to be a great rivalry, 70% Dallas fans in the stadium. It's just, it's dispiriting. It's borderline disgusting. And so I think if these things are right, the NFL needs to do everything in its power to make Daniel Snyder go away.
Peter, my team has unfortunately been dealing with that scenario as well, with 70-30% fans. I'm a Giants fan. Obviously, you've covered the Giants back in the time. John Mara and Steve Tisch have finally brought in a GM who's never had any connections to the organization. It feels like it's a complete rebuild again. 5th pick and 7th pick. A lot of Giants fans feel they should consider trying to move out of 7 for the 4th next year to put themselves in a position to go after one of the quarterbacks next year. You think
they're going to try to do that?
Yeah, I think that's realistic.
I can guarantee you, they are gonna try to move one of those picks in a package and get a 1 for next year. No question about it. Joe Schoen is the GM you're talking about.
Yeah,
I'm very, very high on Joe Schoen. I think he's a bright guy. He's a progressive general manager. He's going to use analytics a lot more than Dave Gettleman did. Dave Gettleman used it as basically he didn't take analytics nearly as seriously as he should have. They were almost like a party favor to him. And so to me, I like Joe Schoen. Time will tell if Brian Daboll's the right pick. We'll see. But Joe Schoen, I think the early reviews on his, on the job that he's done so far, I think have been very positive. As to what I see the Giants doing, they're going to be able to sit there either at 5 or 7 and get a great left tackle. They're going to sit there at 5 and get, I think, one of the 2 tackles in this draft who's, basically one of the 2 tackles who does not have really any question marks. One, Evan Neal from Alabama, and the other one, obviously, is Ike Ekwonu from North Carolina State. I think that the Giants would love to come out of the first round if they could get one of those tackles and then trade down into the bowels of the first round and then pick up another one next year. I think that's what they're going to try to do. The only problem that I see with this strategy is that there just aren't a lot of teams that want to move up high in this draft. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I'm saying that I think it's going to be hard, and the Giants probably are going to have to take less value to do so than they might normally be expected to get.
A lot of people feel that Brian Dable was a large part of the reason why he came in, is that the job he did with Josh Allen, and they see similarities, was he's probably not at that level to Daniel Jones, and he can essentially fix Daniel Jones, as to what John Mara said at the end of the season, that they've done everything to ruin the guy's career.
Here's the thing about the people who would want to throw Daniel Jones out with the garbage. I think you could have put Joe Montana on that team last year. You could have put Tom Brady on that team last year. It would have been an absolute disaster no matter who was the quarterback of that team. It was a non-competitive team. The coach wasn't good. The talent surrounding the quarterback wasn't good. Kadarius Toney and Kenny Galladay were drafted or signed and drafted to give them a big league, big time receiving core. And they were both hurt the whole year. And so I don't know how anybody would expect anybody to be good in that environment. So the Giants are doing the absolute right thing. Joe Schoen is doing the right thing. Daboll's doing the right thing in giving this quarterback a real chance this year. By the end of this year, if he's unimpressive, probably they're going to move on. Everybody knows that. Daniel Jones knows it. But they're doing the right thing and giving this guy a real chance with a big-time general manager, a better head coach, and a better head coach than Joe Judge, and hopefully a healthier team. But we'll see.
Peter, we're going to do a very quick fire final round before we let you go. And I'm going to do the curse here because this goes out on Sunday, and ask you about Tyrann Mathieu Honey Badger. But what will probably happen is he'll probably be joining the team in the next 2 or 3 hours now, and you'll be eating dinner laughing. But where is he going? Because he obviously, I think he visited the Saints last week. I mean, where is he going to end up, do you think?
I mean, I don't know who's going to sign him. My feeling is that he's got 2 high-quality years left. He is one of the best leaders in the NFL. I just think if I were Tyrann Mathieu, I would do pretty much what Bobby Wagner did, even if it meant that he was going to sign for peanuts. I would sign in a place that I thought had the best chance of winning, and a place that my contract was all incentive based, based on how the team does. because I think wherever he goes, they're going to win. I don't know where he's going to go. I know Philadelphia likes him. I know the Saints like him, but I don't know who's going to sign him.
Peter, I suppose you've written really eloquently in the past on the former Broncos owner Pat Bowlen and the team now obviously in the sales process with a price tag in and around $4 billion. Just wondering, I think it was maybe last year you said Jeff Bezos wasn't interested. What price do you think that the Broncos might fetch, and how good a GM will the new owner be getting in George Payton?
I don't know who's going to buy the team, but yeah, I'm hearing the same price that everybody else is hearing. I think it was either The Athletic or Sports Business Journal said that they were looking at a price tag of $4 billion. I think it'd be hard to buy a franchise that looked better for the next few years. Usually a franchise, when it's sold, is a little bit downtrodden. They're down on its luck. Here you've got a quarterback who wants to play another 8 or so years. You've got a young general manager who's had a very, very good run his first year and a half, and who is highly respected around the league. You've got good offensive weapons in the running back position and at wide receiver, and you've got some very good pieces on defense. The Broncos are a heck of a team, and I don't know if it's going to show because of the division they're in, but I think anybody who would be serious about buying this team will be getting a top 10 franchise. That plus the fact that, look, they've had a bunch of no-shows the last couple of years because they've had a terrible quarterback situation. And no matter what they've tried to do, starting with, John Elway, post Peyton Manning, the last 6 years have been a debacle. So I think they've got the quarterback right now, and that's going to be a team that should be a threat the next 5 or 6 years.
Peter, final one for me is, I suppose can't do this without mentioning Tom Brady. He's returning after his 40 days of retirement, but obviously the past fortnights has been the story about him potentially getting involved with the Dolphins from an ownership standpoint. Do you buy into that story, that substance, or do you think it's just off-season?
I think there's something to it, but I asked someone in New Orleans, because here's the crux of the story, that Sean Payton and everybody else, Sean Payton and Tom Brady believed, I think, that if they wanted to, that they could have gone to Miami as a tandem. Now, I think Miami would have loved that, obviously, but I think there's one thing that is missing from that, okay? And the one thing that's missing from that, I think, absolutely, is that the Saints, I don't think we're going to trade Sean Payton. In fact, I was told that the Saints said if he coaches anywhere this year, he's coaching for us. And there's one other factor here. So Tampa Bay and Tom Brady been a fantastic match, just a fantastic match. But I also think that you are looking at one other factor in this. The owners of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Glazer family, have always been looked at, even after they win a couple of Super Bowls in this century. They've always been sort of looked at as the second team in Florida to the Miami Dolphins. because the Dolphins had Don Shula. They had the perfect team in 72. They've got the history. And I think that the owners of the Buccaneers, the Glazer family, who obviously everybody in Europe knows, they're such great and popular owners of Manchester United, that I just find it hard to believe that the Glazer family would have allowed Tom Brady to go to Miami. So again, yes, was there something to the story? Did Sean Payton, I'm assuming that Sean Payton wanted to do this. He's got great affection, as does any offensive coach, whoever coached, who wouldn't have great affection for Brady and wanting to coach him. But I just think there are some things that people haven't thought of in that. I think there's been, will people in Ireland understand the phrase level jumping? There's been a gigantic level jump to just assume that Tom Brady was going to go play for the Miami Dolphins, and I'm just not sure that would have happened.
Hell of an off season so far.
Unbelievable.
Peter.
It's not. Hey, look, I've done it 38 years. There's never been one like this before, ever. I can't imagine. And look, I do think that this is a sign of things to come. I really do, because look, who knows? Next year, will it be DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and whoever else, younger receivers who might be so demanding that they'll get sent off in trade? They might get sent off now. But I just think we've reached a level where, I was doing something today for my column next Monday, and I was looking at sort of the highest paid players at all the positions in football, in the last few years. And if you look at, 10 years ago, 2012, when the salary cap was 120 million, now it's 208 million. It's not even double what it was 10 years ago. But right now, in 2012, the highest paid player average salary was Dwight Freeney, with a $19 million average salary. And right now, you have 13 players who have an average salary of 35 million or more. So what's happening, I think, now is that teams are looking at all the money that they're spending on all these players. And they're looking at this and they're saying, okay, we understand doing it for a quarterback. We're not paying a wide receiver 30 million. We'd rather take that 30 million, which is, on average, which is 14% of our salary cap. We'd rather take it, draft a couple of wide receivers, and try to make our team a little bit less top heavy.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there about your column, obviously Football Morning in America. You get the Peter King podcast as well. And I know you're on the Sky Sports NFL channel a lot with Pro Football Talk and obviously over NBC Sports and Peacock assets as well. Peter, as we said both before and in person, if it wasn't for people like you coming on, especially yourself, Peter, this show wouldn't be what it is today, and we massively appreciate it. And I know that we can hopefully maybe repay you in a schnitzel or a German beer on November the 5th, or maybe November the 13th.
I'm looking forward to seeing you guys over there. It'll be a lot of fun.
Peter, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Okay, good to see you guys again. Take care.